The grand hall of the Zephyrian Empire stretched out like a living ocean frozen in crystal. Its walls pulsed with soft blue light that came from somewhere deep inside the living structure. Princess Lyra stood at the center of the massive room, her pale blue skin shimmering as the bioluminescent patterns along her arms changed color with her emotions. The tentacle-like strands of her hair moved gently in the water-filled air that her people breathed. Around her, dozens of alien representatives sat in floating chairs that adjusted to each species' needs. The War Council had been going on for hours and everyone looked tired. The Void Swarm had destroyed 3 more star systems in the past week. Their mechanical ships moved like a plague across the galaxy, turning everything they touched into more of themselves. No weapon seemed to work against them for long. They learned too fast and adapted too quickly. General Corvex from the rocky granite worlds slammed his stone fist on the table. His people had lost their homeworld just 2 months ago. "We need new ideas," he growled through his translator device. "Everything we try fails within days." Commander Elena Starweaver sat quietly in her chair, her long pointed ears twitching slightly as she listened. Her people, the elves of Sylvania, had fought the swarm using magic and technology combined. Even their ancient arts had not been enough. Her silver hair was pulled back in a military style, and her green eyes showed the weight of too many losses. "Perhaps we should consider retreat to the inner systems," she said in her calm voice. Princess Lyra felt her heart sink. Retreat meant giving up billions of lives. Her people valued every living thing, and the thought of abandoning so many worlds made her sick. "There must be another way," she said, her voice carrying the melodic tones that all Zephyrians used when upset. That was when the great doors of the grand hall burst open with a sound like thunder. A human walked in. Princess Lyra had heard of humans, but had never seen one before. This one was tall and broad, wearing armor that looked like it had been through 100 battles. The metal was scratched and dented, held together in places with what looked like simple wire. His dark hair was cut short, and a scar ran down the left side of his face from his forehead to his jaw. His brown eyes moved quickly around the room, taking in everything and everyone. The moment he stepped into the hall, Princess Lyra felt something strange happen inside her chest. Her heart began to beat faster, and the patterns on her arms shifted to colors she had never seen them show before. There was something about this human that called to her in a way she could not understand. The human stopped in front of the council table and looked directly at her. "Princess Lyra," he said in a rough voice, "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Force. My ship crashed on your world 3 days ago after a fight with swarm scouts." Commander Elena leaned forward in her chair. She had heard stories about humans, but most people thought they were just myths. "You fought the Void Swarm and survived," she said, not really asking. Jake nodded. "My people have been fighting them for 20 years. We have learned things about them that might help you." General Corvex laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Human, your species is barely past the Stone Age compared to ours. What could you possibly know that we do not?" Jake did not get angry at the insult. Instead, he pulled a small device from his belt and placed it on the table. A hologram appeared showing a space battle. Human ships that looked like metal boxes with engines attached were fighting swarm vessels. The human ships were clearly outmatched, but they kept fighting even when they were falling apart. "This was the Battle of Europa Station," Jake said. "We lost 80% of our fleet, but we won. We learned that the swarm has one weakness they cannot adapt to." Princess Lyra found herself leaning closer. "What weakness?" "Chaos," Jake said simply. "They expect logical behavior. They can predict and counter any plan that makes sense. But humans do not always make sense. We do things that are stupid and impossible, and somehow they work." Commander Elena studied the human carefully. His armor was primitive by her standards, but he carried himself like a warrior who had seen real combat. "You are saying that madness is a military strategy?" "Not madness," Jake replied. "Hope. When everything looks impossible, we do impossible things. The swarm cannot understand that because they are machines. They gave up hope when they became what they are." The council room went quiet. Princess Lyra could feel the change in the air. For the first time in months, there was something new to consider. "What do you propose?" she asked, her voice soft. Jake looked around the room at all the different alien faces watching him. I propose we combine your technology and knowledge with human tactics. We teach each other. You show us how your weapons work, and we show you how to use them in ways the swarm will never expect. General Korvax stood up slowly. And why should we trust a species we have never even met before? Jake reached into his armor and pulled out a data chip. Because we have already lost everything we care about to the swarm. Earth is gone. Most of our colonies are gone. We have nothing left to lose and everything to gain by helping you. Princess Lyra felt her heart break a little at the pain she heard in his voice. She had thought her people had suffered, but this human spoke of loss beyond anything she could imagine. Yet he still stood here offering to help strangers. You would risk what remains of your people for us, she said. The swarm will not stop, Jake said. If they finish here, they will find the rest of us eventually. Better to fight together than die alone. Commander Elena stood up from her chair. I am willing to hear his ideas. Princess Lyra looked around the room. She could see hope starting to grow in faces that had shown only despair for months. Then we will try something new, she said. Captain Morrison, you are welcome in our alliance. Jake nodded once. Thank you, Princess. We have work to do. As the council began to break up into smaller groups, Princess Lyra found herself unable to stop watching the human. There was something about him that made her believe they might actually have a chance. For the first time since the war began, she felt hope. 3 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison walked into the Grand Hall. Princess Lyra found herself spending more and more time with the human warrior, learning about his people and their strange ways of fighting. They worked together in her private study, a room filled with living walls that glowed softly and responded to her emotions. Jake sat across from her at a table made from a single piece of coral that had been shaped by Zephyrian bioengineers. His rough hands moved over the smooth surface as he explained human battle tactics using small model ships. The key is not to have a perfect plan, he said. The key is to have 5 bad plans and switch between them so fast that the enemy cannot keep up. Princess Lyra watched his face as he spoke. The scar on his cheek was from a swarm attack that had killed half his crew. He had told her the story the night before, and she had seen the pain in his eyes when he talked about friends who had died to save others. Your people are very brave, she said softly. Not brave, Jake replied. Just stubborn. We do not know when to quit. She laughed at that, a sound like water flowing over stones. Maybe that is the same thing. Jake looked up at her and smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him since he arrived. The expression changed his whole face, making him look younger despite the gray in his hair. Maybe it is, he agreed. I in another part of the station, Commander Elena Starweaver was having a much more difficult time with the human approach to warfare. She stood in the training center watching human soldiers work with elven rangers. The humans moved with no grace at all, but they never stopped moving. When they got knocked down, they got back up. When their weapons broke, they used pieces of the broken weapons. This is not how war should be fought, said Captain Lin Moonwhisper, one of Elena's best officers. The elf looked upset as she watched a human soldier tape his cracked helmet back together. There is no art to it, no beauty. Elena had thought the same thing at first, but she was starting to see something else. Watch them closer, she said to Lin. They do not fight like us, but they never stop fighting. As if to prove her point, a training alarm went off. Swarm scouts had been detected near the outer edge of the system. It was just 3 small ships, but protocol required a response. Elena moved quickly to the command center where Jake and Princess Lyra were already studying the sensor readings. It could be a trap, Elena said as she joined them. Jake nodded. Probably is. They sent scouts to test our responses. But we need to test something too. He turned to Princess Lyra. Can your bioships work with my fighters? Princess Lyra hesitated. Zephyrian bioships were living creatures, bred for centuries to be perfect partners with their pilots. The idea of working closely with alien technology felt wrong to her people. It would be difficult, she said. Everything worthwhile is difficult, Jake replied. The question is whether we try. Princess Lyra looked into his brown eyes and felt that strange stirring in her chest again. There was something about his confidence that made her want to believe anything was possible. "We will try," she said. An hour later, Elena found herself in the cockpit of her own fighter, flying beside human and Zephyrian ships toward the enemy scouts. Her ship was a work of art, grown from living wood and metal that had been sung into shape by elven craftspeople. It moved through space like a dancer, responding to her thoughts more than her hands. The human ships looked like flying scrap heaps beside her elegant craft. Jake flew the lead fighter, a battered vessel that seemed to be held together by luck and determination. The Zephyrian bioships were beautiful in their own way, their living hulls rippling with patterns of light as they communicated with their pilots. "Remember the plan," Jake said over the radio. "No plan survives contact with the enemy, so be ready to forget the plan." Elena shook her head at the human contradiction, but she was learning that humans said things like that all the time. They seemed to enjoy making no sense. The swarm scouts detected them long before they arrived. The mechanical ships turned to face them, their black hulls absorbing light like holes in space. Elena had fought these ships before and knew how dangerous they were. They learned from every attack and adapted their defenses within minutes. "Attack pattern Alpha," Jake said calmly. The mixed squadrons spread out and began their approach. Elena's ship danced between laser blasts while the bioships used their natural flexibility to avoid damage. The human fighters just flew straight at the enemy and started shooting. The first swarm ship exploded under concentrated fire, but the other two immediately changed their tactics. They began to predict the elegant movements of Elena's ship and the flowing patterns of the bioships. Within minutes, they were hitting their targets regularly. "They are adapting too fast," Princess Lyra said over the radio. Her bioship had taken several hits and was bleeding glowing fluid into space. "Now we switch to pattern Omega," Jake said. Elena had no idea what pattern Omega was. It had not been in any of their planning sessions. "What is pattern Omega?" she asked. "Make it up as we go," Jake replied, and then his fighter did something that made no sense at all. He flew straight at the nearest swarm ship and rammed it, but just before impact, he ejected from his fighter. The empty ship crashed into the swarm vessel while Jake floated in space in his survival suit. The explosion destroyed both ships, but Jake was already being picked up by Princess Lyra's bioship. Elena stared in shock. No pilot would ever abandon a perfectly good ship like that. It went against everything she had been taught about aerial combat. But it had worked. The swarm ship had not expected such an impossible move. The remaining enemy vessel tried to adapt to the new tactic, but there was no logic to adapt to. Elena found herself laughing as she realized what the human was teaching them. "Pattern Omega," she said to herself, and then did something she had never done before. She flew her beautiful ship directly into the path of the enemy's main weapon and used it as a shield while the bioships attacked from behind. Her ship's living hull screamed in pain, but it held together long enough for the bioships to destroy the last swarm scout. After the battle, they returned to the station. Elena's ship would take weeks to heal from the damage, but they had won without losing anyone. More importantly, they had proven that the three species could work together. Jake climbed out of Princess Lyra's bioship and walked over to Elena as she examined her wounded craft. "I am sorry about your ship," he said. Elena looked at the human warrior and felt something she had not expected. Respect. "It will heal," she said. "And I learned something today." "What did you learn?" "That sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is break something perfectly." Elena smiled at the human. "Your people are insane, but I think I like that." Jake laughed. "Coming from an elf, that might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said about humans." Princess Lyra joined them, her skin glowing with patterns that Jake was learning meant happiness and excitement. "The bioship pilots are talking about what happened," she said. "They want to try more impossible things." Jake looked at both women and felt something he had not felt since Earth was destroyed. He felt like he had found people who understood him. "Then we should give them plenty of chances," he said. As they walked back toward the command center, Elena found herself thinking about how much had changed in just a few weeks. She had gone from seeing humans as primitive to seeing them as necessary. Princess Lyra walked beside Jake like they had known each other for years instead of days. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Elena believed they might actually win it. The war room buzzed with activity as species from across the galaxy prepared for the largest battle in their history. Princess Lyra stood before a massive holographic display showing the Void Swarm harvesting fleet that had appeared at the edge of the Kepler system. 50 massive ships were stripping 3 planets down to their cores, turning everything into more swarm vessels. Jake Morrison studied the enemy formation with the cold eyes of someone who had seen too many battles. The swarm fleet was arranged in perfect geometric patterns, each ship positioned to provide maximum protection and firepower. It was a beautiful formation if you liked death and destruction. They have been there for 6 days, Commander Elena Starweaver reported. Our long-range sensors show they will finish with those worlds in less than 48 hours. After that, they will have doubled their fleet size. Princess Lyra felt sick thinking about the billions of people being processed into raw materials. Her people could sense life across vast distances, and she could feel each death like a small wound in her heart. We cannot let them finish, she said. We won't, Jake said simply. Operation Last Light begins in 12 hours. The plan they had developed over the past month was insane, even by human standards. 3 fleets would attack the swarm simultaneously from different directions. The Zephyrian bioships would use their living hulls to get close to the enemy vessels and attach themselves like parasites. The Elven ships would use their cloaking technology to appear suddenly in the middle of the swarm formation. The human ships would do what humans did best, cause chaos. Elena looked at the tactical display and shook her head. The casualties will be enormous, she said quietly. Yes, Jake agreed. But if we do nothing, the casualties will be everyone. Princess Lyra reached out and touched Jake's hand. The contact sent warm tingles up her arm that had nothing to do with her bioelectric abilities. Are you afraid? She asked. Jake looked at her with those steady brown eyes that had become so familiar to her. Terrified, he said. Fear keeps you alive in battle. It makes you think faster and move quicker. Elena watched the exchange between the human and the Zephyrian princess. Over the past weeks, she had seen their friendship grow into something deeper. It should have been impossible for 2 such different species to connect, but somehow they fit together like pieces of a puzzle. The Elven fleet is ready, Elena reported. 200 ships, all equipped with the new Chaos drives that your engineers helped us build. The Chaos drives were Jake's idea. Instead of following normal flight patterns, they made random course corrections every few seconds. It made flying much more difficult, but it also made the ships nearly impossible for the swarm to predict and target. Zephyrian biofleet is prepared as well, Princess Lyra said. 300 living ships, each one eager to prove that life is stronger than death. Jake nodded and activated his communication system. All human vessels, this is Morrison. You know what we're here to do. Remember that the enemy learns from everything we try, so try everything. If something works, do it until it stops working, then do something else. If something doesn't work, do it anyway because maybe it will confuse them. Elena laughed despite her nervousness. That is the most human battle speech I have ever heard. It's honest, Jake replied. Ready, Princess. Princess Lyra took a deep breath of the water-rich air that her people needed. All fleets begin the jump. Space twisted around them as hundreds of ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler system. The swarm responded immediately, their perfect formations shifting to meet the new threats. But for the first time in the war, the swarm hesitated for a fraction of a second. They could not decide which threat to focus on first. Jake's voice crackled over the radio. That's our opening. All ships attack. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Princess Lyra's bioships flowed through space like schools of fish, their living hulls glowing with battle excitement. They attached themselves to swarm vessels and began to eat through the mechanical armor with acids and enzymes that had been designed for this purpose. Elena's elven ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking from impossible angles before vanishing back into the darkness. Their weapons fired beams of pure energy that had been focused through crystals grown in the hearts of dying stars. The human ships fought like Jake had promised they would, without any sense at all. They rammed enemy vessels, used their own ships as missiles, and kept fighting even when they were falling apart. One human captain ejected his entire crew in escape pods and then flew his empty ship into a swarm command vessel, destroying both. Princess Lyra watched from her flagship as Jake led a squadron of mixed human and bio ships against the largest swarm vessel. His fighter was already damaged, smoke trailing from one engine, but he kept pushing forward. "Jake, your ship is badly damaged," she called over the radio. "Return to base." "Negative," Jake replied. "This big one is controlling the others. If we take it out, the whole fleet will be confused." Elena's ship appeared beside Jake's fighter, her cloaking system deactivating. "I will cover you," she said. The two ships flew toward the massive swarm vessel together, dodging the defensive fire that filled space around them. Elena's ship danced between the laser blasts while Jake's fighter just absorbed the damage and kept going. They were almost at the target when Jake's ship took a direct hit from a plasma cannon. The fighter began to spin out of control, its hull cracking open like an egg. Princess Lyra watched in horror as the human she had come to care about more than she wanted to admit began to fall toward the enemy ship. "Jake!" she screamed over the radio. "I'm okay." His voice came back, strained but determined. "Ship's dead, but I'm not. Elena, can you get me close to that thing?" "Are you insane?" Elena replied, but she was already moving her ship toward his position. "Probably," Jake said as he floated in space in his survival suit. "But it might work." Elena's ship caught Jake in its tractor beam and pulled him close. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for centuries. Jake attached explosive charges from his survival kit to Elena's ship, then had her fly directly at the swarm vessel's main weapon. At the last second, Elena teleported away using elven technology while Jake and the explosives continued toward the target. The explosion when Jake hit the swarm ship's main cannon was bright enough to be seen from the other side of the system. The massive vessel began to break apart, its command signals to the rest of the fleet cutting off abruptly. Princess Lyra held her breath, waiting to hear Jake's voice on the radio. Seconds passed that felt like hours. "Morrison to fleet!" Jake's voice finally crackled over the communication system. "Target destroyed. I'm alive barely. Someone want to pick me up before I freeze to death out here." Princess Lyra launched her personal rescue ship before anyone else could respond. She found Jake floating unconscious in space, his survival suit keeping him alive but just barely. As she pulled him into her ship, she realized that her feelings for this impossible human had grown beyond simple attraction. The battle continued for 6 more hours, but without their command ship, the swarm fleet began to make mistakes. Ships that had worked perfectly together for decades started getting in each other's way. By the time the last enemy vessel was destroyed, the Alliance had won its first major victory. Elena's ship limped back to the staging area with damage to nearly every system. She had never flown so recklessly in her life, and she was surprised to discover that she had enjoyed it. Princess Lyra sat beside Jake's medical bed as the humans slowly woke up. His survival suit had protected him from the worst of the explosion, but he would need weeks to recover from his injuries. "Did we win?" he asked weakly. "We won," Princess Lyra said, her voice thick with emotion. "But you almost died." Jake smiled at her with cracked lips. "Almost doesn't count. Besides, someone has to teach you two how to fight properly." Elena entered the medical bay and looked down at the battered human warrior. "I think we are learning," she said. "Though I hope future lessons are less dangerous." Jake laughed, then winced as the movement hurt his ribs. "Elena, in case no one has told you, war is supposed to be dangerous." Princess Lyra felt tears running down her face, something that Zephyrians only did during moments of extreme emotion. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered. Jake reached out and took her hand with his bandaged fingers. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "We still have a war to win." As Princess Lyra held Jake's hand and Elena stood watch over them both, they knew that this victory was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead of them. Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of the Alliance flagship, looking out at the strangest sight he had ever seen. The Void Swarm's central hub hung in space like a mechanical cancer, surrounded by rings of artificial planets that defied every law of physics he knew. The whole system pulsed with dark energy that made his teeth ache just looking at it. "The intelligence we gathered from the command ship was correct," Princess Lyra said as she joined him at the viewport. Her recovery from their last battle had been faster than his, but Jake could still see the worry in her bioluminescent patterns. This is where they coordinate their entire campaign across the galaxy. Commander Elena Starweaver entered the observation deck carrying data tablets, and wearing the grim expression she got when delivering bad news. The reconnaissance probes confirm our worst fears, she said. The hub is protected by energy fields that will drain the life force from my people in minutes. The Zephyrian bioships will be corrupted by some kind of virus within hours of entering the system. Jake turned away from the impossible sight outside. His body still ached from their last battle, but his mind was clear. And human ships will probably explode the moment they get close, Elena finished. The energy readings are off every scale we have. Princess Lyra moved closer to Jake, her tentacle-like hair brushing against his arm in a gesture of comfort that had become familiar between them. Perhaps we should wait, she said. Find another way. There is no other way, Jake replied. Every day we wait, they build more ships and destroy more worlds. This is our only chance. Elena set her tablets down on the nearby table and looked at both of them. Over the months they had fought together, the three of them had become more than allies. They were friends, family even, bound together by shared battles and mutual respect. The plan requires each of our fleets to do something that will probably kill them, she said quietly. Jake nodded. I know. The bioships will have to allow themselves to be infected and then overcome the virus from the inside. Your elven ships will have to enter a realm completely empty of natural energy. My people will have to fly into the heart of that thing and plant charges while everything around them tries to kill them. Princess Lyra felt her heart breaking as she listened to Jake describe their desperate plan. Each element required a level of sacrifice that went beyond normal military duty. I cannot ask my people to poison themselves, even for victory, she whispered. You're not asking, Jake said gently. They volunteered. All of them. Just like Elena's mystic warriors volunteered to enter a place that goes against everything they believe in. Elena touched Princess Lyra's shoulder with a pale hand. My people understand that sometimes you must embrace darkness to preserve light, she said. Your bioships know that sometimes you must accept poison to develop immunity. Jake looked at both women and felt the weight of what they were about to attempt. My people are used to doing impossible things, he said. But this time feels different. Princess Lyra turned to face him completely, her large eyes reflecting the strange light from the hub outside. Different how? This time I have something to lose, Jake said, looking first at her and then at Elena. Before, when Earth was destroyed, I thought I had lost everything that mattered. Fighting was easy because I had nothing left to protect. But now. He didn't finish the sentence, but both women understood. The bonds they had formed had given them all something worth living for, which made the thought of dying much harder. Elena smiled sadly. Caring about people makes you a better warrior, not a worse one, she said. It gives you reason to come home. Princess Lyra stepped even closer to Jake, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her alien skin. Jake Morrison, she said formally, using the tone Zephyrians reserved for important declarations. I need to tell you something before we begin this battle. Jake felt his heart start beating faster. What is it? I love you, she said simply. I know we are different species and this war might kill us all, but I needed you to know. Jake stared at her for a long moment, then reached out and touched her face with his scarred hand. I love you too, he said. I didn't think it was possible, but somehow you made me believe in hope again. Elena watched the exchange with mixed emotions. She was happy for her friends, but she also felt a loneliness that she had not experienced in her long life. You two are disgustingly romantic, she said with a small smile. But if we survive this, I want to be at your wedding. Jake laughed and pulled Elena into an embrace that included Princess Lyra. If we survive this, you can perform the ceremony, he said. They stood together for a moment, three warriors from different worlds who had found family in the middle of a war. Then duty called them back to the business of saving the galaxy. The final briefing took place in the main conference room with representatives from all three fleets. Jake looked around the table at faces that had become familiar over months of fighting together. There were humans with scars and cybernetic implants, elves with ancient eyes and graceful movements, and Zephyrians whose skin patterns told stories of courage and loss. The timing has to be perfect, Jake explained. The bioships go in first and allow themselves to be infected. The virus will think it has won and lower the inner defenses. That's when the elven fleet uses their magic to punch through the energy barriers. Finally, my team takes shuttles to the core and plants the charges. Captain Lin Moonwhisper, Elena's second-in-command, raised her hand. What if the bioships cannot overcome the infection? Princess Lyra answered before Jake could. Then they will destroy themselves rather than become weapons of the swarm, she said. Each ship carries charges that will detonate if the pilot loses control. The room went quiet as everyone absorbed the implications. The bioships were living creatures with their own thoughts and feelings. Asking them to commit suicide was almost unthinkable. Jake stood up and walked to the holographic display showing the enemy hub. I won't lie to any of you, he said. This mission will probably kill most of us. Maybe all of us. But if we don't try, the swarm will eventually consume everything. Every world, every species, every life in the galaxy. Elena joined him at the display. My people have a saying, she said. Better to burn brightly for a moment than to fade slowly in darkness. My people believe that life finds a way, Princess Lyra added. Even in the darkest places, something good can grow. Jake looked around the room one more time. Humans' saying is simpler, he said. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Anyone who wants to back out can do so now with no shame. Nobody moved. Then we launch in 6 hours, Jake said. Get some rest, check your equipment, and say goodbye to anyone you need to say goodbye to. As the briefing broke up, Elena lingered behind with Jake and Princess Lyra. There is something else we found in the intelligence data, she said quietly. Something I didn't want to share with the others. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What? The hub isn't just a command center, Elena said. It's a prison. The original consciousness of the species that became the Void Swarm is trapped inside, forced to watch as their bodies are used to destroy everything they once loved. Princess Lyra gasped. They are still alive in there. In a sense, Elena nodded. Which means we might be able to save them instead of just destroying them. Jake stared at the holographic display of the enemy hub with new eyes. That changes everything, he said. Does it? Elena asked. Jake thought for a moment, then shook his head. No. It just makes success more important. We go in, we plant the charges, and we find a way to free whatever is left of them. Princess Lyra took Jake's hand in hers. Together, she said. Together, Elena agreed. Jake squeezed Princess Lyra's hand and looked at Elena. 6 hours? He said. Then we find out if the impossible is just another word for possible. As they left the conference room, each of them knew that everything they had fought for would be decided in the next few hours. The war, their lives, and their love would all be tested in the dark heart of the Void Swarm's domain.